many things that I'm going to be talking to you today. So, Hemant asked me to talk about um, what we learn from yoga in terms of the modern psychotherapy. And so, the first thing I want to say is that I'm not a yoga expert, as you heard just now. My primary work is in the area of neuroimaging and early interventions in schizophrenia. And so I want to start off with a disclosure that I'm not a yoga expert, nor am I a theologist. I'm not even a card carrying psychotherapist. Um, but the one thing that I can say is that from childhood onwards, I've been interested in the Bhagavad Gita and the insights it gives into modern life. And Um, so, as I became a physician and then a psychiatrist, I started thinking about what can be learned from the Gita. And so, I'm going to talk about some of those things. This is the button just here. Okay. So, you're all students of, or many of you are students of integrative medicine, right? And I don't need to teach you a lot about the historical evolution of yoga, but I'm going to briefly talk to you about how it all developed. And yoga probably goes back to about 2.5 millennia ago, when even in the Indus Valley, there were seals that were discovered that had yogic postures, people with yogic postures. So, some kind of a yogic practice might have been in existence at that time. However, um, it took another few hundred years, um, probably for the more crystallized ideas of yoga to emerge in the Vedas as well as the Upanishads, going back to maybe 1500 BC and 900 BC for the Upanishads. And then came the Mahabharata, where which is a large poem of 124,000 stanzas of the war between two sets of cousins in the greater India of that time, and they were fighting a battle. And one chapter in that um, epic was the Bhagavad Gita, which has about 700 stanzas, which was basically a psychotherapeutic session, or at least it could have been 18 sessions, or it could be one long session, who knows. And that is what the Bhagavad Gita was, which really summarizes um, the principles of yoga in a broad sense, as it might have been defined at that time. And then came the Buddha, who really developed the ideas even further. In some ways, clearing out the theological aspects of the yoga at that time and developing some concepts of yogic meditation even further. And then in parallel to that, there were several similar ideas that were emerging in the East, in China and other Eastern Hemisphere countries, such as Confucius and Lao Tse, Tung, and so forth, who developed respectively the Taoism and Confucianism aspects of Eastern spirituality. So here is the story of Arjuna, and this sketch was developed by Chat GPT because I couldn't find any single place where I could find Krishna doing psychotherapy. So I asked Chat GPT to come up with a picture, and here is what you have: Krishna with in the middle of the battlefield with Arjuna on a couch with the psychotherapy. And then in that session, Arjuna describes, like a patient would to his psychiatrist, his symptoms of what might be called a panic attack. But a a better description for this might be battle neurosis, some kind of an acute traumatic syndrome. His limbs are feeble, his mouth is parched, his body is shaking, his hair is standing on end. Um, his bow is slipping from his hand, and his skin is also burning a lot. His mind begins to reel, and he is not even able to stand. So he's beginning to see some hallucinations, and he is despondent. He doesn't know what to do. Why am I here? Why should I kill my kith and kin in this battle? My own cousins and uncles and grandparents and so forth. So he is really in a dilemma. So that is what the pretext of where the Bhagavad Gita is, preached by Krishna, and in that long psychotherapeutic session. So, in summary, it's a 700 stanza poem. It's a single case study, like a lot of other Indian scriptures. Indians are good at storytelling. You take any Upanishads for that matter, they all have stories. And teachings are done in the context of stories, dialogue, and there is a guru and there is a total trust by the disciple of the guru. It's a psychotherapeutic encounter, which is a kind of a asymmetric encounter where there is the authoritative therapist, unlike modern day psychotherapy where there is more of an equality. But in ancient Indian practices, there was this guru chela concept that you can think of, which is a little bit different from the way Western psychotherapy is practiced. It's a directive approach, like a teacher and student. And it is a crisis oriented therapy in the middle of a battlefield. So, the Bhagavad Gita has been looked at by people all over the world, but to the West, it took almost several millennia before it arrived there. And Ralph Waldo Emerson, who is considered one of the most influential poets, is the poet laureate of America. In the 19th century, he came across a book of the Bhagavad Gita, and he was so awestruck by it. This is what he said: I owe a magnificent day to the Gita, and it was the first of books. It was as if an empire spoke to us. Nothing small or unworthy, but a large, serene, consistent voice of an old intelligence. So Emerson really was so influenced by it, but he developed an entire philosophy, and which several generations later actually influenced Mahatma Gandhi as well. And even modern psychology was influenced because several generations down was a student, William James, who became the father of American psychology, who met the Vivekananda, by the way, and was very influenced by the Gita. And he taught one of his students, Jacobson, to learn yoga, the Shavasana. And that is what became the progressive muscular relaxation. And that is how Western interest in the yoga began. So let's go into what the Gita says. And I'm going to really put in a little summary here. Like in our practice everywhere in psychiatry, medicine, you make a diagnosis and you make a diagnostic formulation. So Krishna makes a diagnostic formulation and he says to Arjuna, your problem is you don't know who you are. So everything goes back to the self. And being too attached to your individual self is what might be causing you your agony. So you're overly attached to yourself, and let's say you want something but you lost it, you get depressed. You're afraid you might get something, you get anxious. You did not get what you wanted and you resent it, that leads to anger. You believe only you have it and only you can do it, like Trump said in modern times. It's pride. I don't have what others have, and that is jealousy. And if you desperately want something, that becomes lust. And if you think that other people hate you because you have something that they don't, that is paranoia. So think of all the negative emotions. They all go back to that one single letter, I. Okay. So that's what Krishna said. The I is the problem. And as Bodhi said, you invert the I. Yeah, no, he said it very cleverly. Let me see how. I think you told me. The big problem is a me, and you invert the me, it becomes a we, right? So it's all like M becoming a Shirshasana on top of that, right? So that's the main idea that Krishna was proposing to Arjuna, right? So I'm going to take you a little bit more into the details of this. Oh, let's see. Did I lose the screen? Okay. So Krishna said, understanding yourself is the solution to your problem. And he said there are four paths to this. There is the karma path, action path. There is the bhakti path, which is the devotional path. There is the jnana path, which is the knowledge. And then there is the dhyana path, which is the mindfulness and the meditation part of it. So we'll have that as your background as we go into the next parts of what I'm going to say. So this is my sketch of the Bhagavad Gita. And the reason I put that in here is, like all doctors, Krishna begins with educating the patient as to how the mind works, how the mind and the body are connected. And he doesn't directly get into this in the Gita, but before him, before the Bhagavad Gita, Katha Upanishad has used this metaphor of the chariot. A few centuries later, Plato used the same metaphor. The point is that body is like the chariot, and the senses, the chariot is being pulled in all directions by the senses, which are the horses. The mind, which regulates the horses, are the reins. And there is the charioteer, which is the spirit. So the mind and the body and the spirit are an integration of all of these things. And this is the first time any school of thought all over the world made people understand the unity of the mind, body, and the spirit, which, as I will say a little bit later, was lost to mankind because of the dualism that developed, mind and the body being distinct and so on. Can you take that thing out? One at a time. And I'm going to take you through the four paths that he talks about. And then I'll try to do what Hemant asked me to do once upon a time. He said, Dr. K, I'm really searching for a theory of everything. So we'll try to get to that at the end. So the first thing that Krishna says is that you're not really a constant. What you think you are will come and go. And that's the body that will come and go. Everything is going to change. Change is the only constant. So Arjuna accept this, that everything is impermanent. So he said in the second chapter, as a person sheds worn out garments and wears new ones, at the time of the death, the soul casts off its own worn body and enters a new one. Now, this is a concept that resonates later in psychotherapy, in this modern version of psychotherapy called acceptance and commitment therapy. The fundamental principle in ACT, or acceptance and commitment therapy, is that everything is impermanent. Okay, so where did Stephen Hayes get that idea from? He must have read the ancient Hindu and Buddhist scriptures. Buddhism has taken it even to a more serious level, that everything not only is impermanent, but nothing exists according to the Buddha. Buddhist scriptures. So Krishna, in his 18 sessions, has 18 chapters of the Bhagavad Gita. And the Gita is beautifully organized. And just like any package of therapeutic intervention, he takes Arjuna through a series of ideas and tests Arjuna whether this is okay with him, does it work or not. And Arjuna is a very impatient, restless soul. He doesn't understand and he asks questions. Help me understand. I'm not understanding this, and so on. So he jumps from karma to jnana to bhakti, and finally reveals what might be good for Arjuna and tells him that you take it from here. So it's organized in such a way that the first six chapters are more about the karma path, which I'm going to talk to you more about. The second six chapters is about the bhakti path, and the last six chapters is about the jnana path. And in the 18th chapter, he summarizes. The first chapter is simply the patient's own description of his symptoms. That is Arjuna's narration of his own problem. Second chapter is kind of a formulation. It's a diagnostic formulation of what the problem is. And then comes the different packages of the psychotherapeutic program. So karma is about doing things right, doing it well. Jnana is about knowing oneself. And bhakti is about emotion. We'll get to that. And the one tool that helps an individual to integrate all of these together, doing, knowing, and feeling, the three components of the mind: cognition, emotion, and behavior. They all need to be integrated. And so you need an integrative package. You're all members of an integrative medicine department, so you all know what I'm getting there. Integration is yoga. So that yoga is the fulcrum which integrates doing karma, knowing jnana, and feeling bhakti into one thing. And so that is, in essence, the nutshell of what Arjuna is going to teach. Sorry, Krishna is going to teach Arjuna. So let's take each one of these at a time. So the jnana path. Krishna tells Arjuna, you are not your thoughts. This is very reminiscent of current day thinking in psychology and psychiatry. There is this whole concept of metacognition, that is, the ability of the mind to observe itself, thinking about thinking. That's called metacognition. So there is a therapy approach that has been developed called metacognitive therapy by Adrian Wells. The idea is that one way of thinking about a negative feeling is to identify oneself with that negative feeling. Yeah, I get this feeling that I'm a loser. It is me thinking that I'm a loser. So I am a loser. That's because you're identifying yourself with the thinker. So what metacognitive therapy does is to help the individual detach himself from being the thinker to the observer of the thoughts. So instead of thinking I'm a loser, to say, oh, there I'm going again. My mind is thinking I'm a loser. So mind is also an object. So there is an observer of the mind. So that is the concept behind Jnana Yoga, in essence, to distinguish between the observer and the observed. So that is in Upanishads. It's it's described as Drik Drishya Viveka. That is knowing the distinction between the observer and the observed, and so on. That is very much reminiscent of this concept called metacognitive therapy. So we talked about acceptance and commitment therapy. Come to metacognitive therapy. So Now, this whole idea of identifying ourselves as the thinker goes back to René Descartes, a French philosopher of the 17th century, 18th century AD, early 18th century, who argued that I think, so I exist. So to him, the only evidence that I exist is because I think. So the only thing that exists is my thinking. So that is what he used as the argument to say that the mind is the person's thinking. But he also argued that there is something else that is controlling the mind. That is the spirit, the soul, and that his argument was that the mind and the mind resides in the head, and then the spirit is outside, like a person sitting on a chair and looking at a monitor and controlling the mind with his. And he said the thing that connects the mind and the soul is the pineal gland. So that was a very influential um, philosophical school at that time. It led to this Cartesian philosophy, which was in some ways the foundation of psychology, modern psychology, and took psychology in that dualistic direction, which in some ways was a setback. So, this cartoon is about the importance of knowing oneself. It's important to know oneself before knowing, trying to know other people. And so, the point that um, the Bhagavad Gita, as well as subsequently the Advaitic schools and then Buddhistic schools talk about. Shankara in Hinduism really took it to a very high levels, thinking that the self is an illusion, right? So Jnana Yoga is about self being viewed as an illusion. Psychologists talk about this by they describe it with the in the form of this illusion called the Canisa square. So if you look at those four pie diagrams, they're all arranged in such a way that they form a square. But if you really think about it, it looks like there is a square, but there is no square there. You think that there is a square because of the surroundings. Just like, there is no Keshavan. Okay? Keshavan came up because his parents named him Keshavan. Other people began calling him Keshavan. And so he began to believe that he is Keshavan. So just see how it goes. So we all construct that kind of a illusion about ourselves. We have no idea whether we exist, right? So I'm not going to go into the philosophy of it, but just to give you an idea that this is what the Jnana Yoga path is. Okay. And the Vedantic scholars point out, in this form of illustration, that there may be multiple parts, and there is a sun that is reflected in each pot. So each pot might think that the sun exists inside that pot, but will not realize unless you really go higher above and see that there is one sun that is reflected in all of these pots. So the same truth may be reflected differently in different parts. And that is, again, is an extension of this idea that self is something that we construct, but there may be something that is much more universal than the individual self. Okay. All right. So the Hindu and the Buddhist views will differ a little bit in terms of their concept of self. The Hindu view is that everything is the self. They use the term Brahman for this, but you can define it in multiple different ways. There is the individual self. You can include the family in that. You could include the nation and the world and the entire cosmos and so forth. And ultimately, the view is that we're all a drop in the ocean, that everything is the self with a big S. Buddhists took the opposite view, and that self doesn't exist, but they did not really develop a concept of a cosmic self. So that's a variation, but they all come to the same point. The common thing between Hindu and the Buddhist schools is that they both view the self as an illusion. And so, apart from knowing oneself, it's also important, the Vedanta concepts talk about knowing the terrain in which the self operates. And there is the psychoanalytical classification of the superego and the ego and the id, and they may be roughly translated into the sattvic and the rajasic and the tamasic aspects of our individual self. So there may be multiple selves within us, depending on how you define it. The self that only identifies itself with one part of our body and the mind is the id, and then you begin to identify yourself with a larger society and the universe. You really go higher and higher. And this kind of roughly is also parallel to the way human evolution happened, or the evolution in life, from a reptilian to a limbic to a neocortical evolution. The reptilian focused mostly on survival, limbic more on emotions, and the cortical stage of development focused more on the intellect. And I won't go into all of those details. Again, there are parallels to that with the Maslowian hierarchy. Abraham Maslow, a well-known psychologist in the 1940s and 50s, he developed this hierarchy, which is very similar to the Hindu thinking, that there is the lowest level, which is determined physiologically for survival purposes, and then the middle levels, which are more limbic, um, which are developed for the purposes of love and self-esteem, and then the higher levels, which are more neocortical, which begins to reflect upon itself. And so there is a parallel from a psychological side, there is a parallel from the neurophysiological side, there is a parallel from the psychoanalytical side for this kind of thinking about the terrain in which we operate, that self. Let's see how this applies to psychotherapy. There are many different kinds of psychotherapy, as you all know. There is your CBT, and there is your rational emotive behavior therapy. What does CBT do? Cognitive behavior therapy. The idea of cognitive behavior therapy is to look at a thought and, put on a scientific hat and begin to see whether the thought is rational or not rational. So this is called the cognitive restructuring. Understand the nature of cognition, nature of thinking, and correct it by validating or invalidating it based on external evidence. So cognitive behavior therapy focuses on cognition. What does reality behavioral therapy, or RBT, rational emotive therapy, do? So this is similar to what Krishna does to Arjuna. Just give up your, feeble heart and get up and fight. Don't worry about your thoughts or emotions. Your duty is to act, and you're a warrior, you have to fight. He focuses on just Arjuna's actions. So that is what is called reality behavior therapy. But at the same time, in the same chapter, he talks about you're thinking illogically. Think about logic. What is the right thing to do and what's not the right thing to do, and who are the people that are doing the wrong thing. Uh, make up your mind as to which side you're on and fight. So that is CBT. So Krishna tries both CBT and reality emotive therapy. Doesn't work. Arjuna is still confused. So then Krishna tries the next one, which is think of who you are. You're not your thoughts. Observe your own thoughts and understand the nature of your impermanence, and stop worrying about killing, because you really are not killing. You're not dying yourself. You will remain the same. The same spirit will continue before and after death, and so on. So that kind of a thinking about the self, observing oneself, becoming the observer of an observed self is what is metacognitive therapy. So Krishna tries all of those things. So this is my point. So we move now from um, Jnana Yoga to Karma Yoga. And so the key point of Karma Yoga is that focus on the journey, not the destination. Right? So most of the time in our life, we are, looking for one particular thing, like getting a high marks and getting a medal or getting a trophy or getting a big salary and so forth. But the joy that you get at the time of your destination is very short. Most of your time is spent in the journey. So Krishna's point is focus on the journey and not on the destination. So that's Karma Yoga, basically. So Karma Yoga can be looked at in three components to it. The three are doing the right thing, doing good is one thing. Doing it well is the second thing. And goddamn do it is the third thing. So there is the right thing, doing it right, doing it well, and doing it. And there are some concepts which emerge in modern psychology which resonate back to the Vedantic writings. They are all part of this Karma Yoga. I'm going to take you through each of those. These are the concepts of intrinsic motivation and growth mindset, the higher purpose, and the concept of flow, and the concept of grit. They all have their Sanskrit equivalents in the Bhagavad Gita and the Upanishads. Now, what is extrinsic motivation? Deci and Ryan, and psychologists in the early 1980s, developed this concept that there are two kinds of motivation. The motivation that we have to get a prize, external rewards, and then the motivation that comes from our own internal rewards. So you can see the face of the person who is looking for the prize on the left. He looks miserable. On the other hand, on the right side, he's not so miserable. He is motivated simply because he is enjoying the running part of it. So the distinction is that extrinsic motivation is about performing an activity to get a reward. Intrinsic motivation is to perform an activity for for its own sake. Carol Dweck, another psychologist from New York, develops this concept of growth mindset. She did this experiment in New York schools. She was an educational psychologist who had done this experiment where there were two groups of students in schools, high school. In one group, the teachers took the approach of encouraging the students for their effort. You did a good job, is what they would say to the students. Whether they got high marks or not was not what they were reinforcing. In the other class, other group of students, the teachers took the approach of admiring the rank or the marks that they got, that the students got, reinforcing that they are smart. Instead of saying you made a good effort, they're saying you're smart. And then she followed up these kids over several more years, and he found that those who were rewarded for their effort did much better than those who were rewarded for their smartness. So smartness is something that is fixed. So it becomes a fixed mindset. I'm smart, I can do this. I'm not so smart, I can't do anything. Becomes a fixed mindset compared to, I'm going to try. If I fail, it's a learning opportunity. Everything is a stepping stone towards success. And, if you succeed, that's my success, and that sort of thing. That's called growth mindset. So this again goes back to some of the ancient concepts in Karma Yoga. So another important concept in yoga, Karma Yoga, which refers to the concept that I will talk about here. Here is a painter. Um, his name is Rob Ross. He's very famous in America. He does all these demonstrations of painting on video, and you can see him painting that stroke with his brush of a tree. He's totally immersed in doing that, and each stroke that he paints, he is already getting immediate reward, that it is becoming a tree with one stroke of his paintbrush, right? So he doesn't need a trophy or a prize for his painting. His reward is already there. The action itself is the reward. And you can see the same thing with other examples. Whether it is playing golf, or playing cricket, or a piece of music. You get into a state where you're totally immersed. So that's a state where you don't experience time. Time doesn't flow, and it's a timeless feeling. You're doing something at your best capacity. And if it becomes too difficult and you can't do it, you get frustrated, and you drop out. And if it is too easy, you get bored and you drop out as well. So you need to find that zone where you are within that window of your competence. So a psychologist by name Csikszentmihalyi, he developed this. He studied hundreds of successful achievers in different domains of life. He found one thing that was common to all of them, and that is that they all described a state of flow. You get into a zone where you don't feel like time, you don't feel the time passing. Okay, you feel like you're completely with it. You don't even feel who you are, you just become one with the work. And that is what is called the concept of flow. So he said, flow is being completely involved in an activity for its own sake. The ego falls away, time flies. Every action, movement, and thought follows inevitably from the previous one, like playing jazz. Unfortunately, he passed away recently. The third concept is what is called grit. Angela Duckworth, another psychologist, who is the niece of a close colleague of mine in New York, became very famous with this concept where the kids who succeed in life are not necessarily those who are highly talented, but those who have grit. Despite failures, they are the ones that somehow pick up, dust themselves off, and move ahead. And that is what in karmic literature is described to as dhriti. Or grit is the Sanskrit is the term that Angela Duckworth uses for this. So talent is good, but not enough. You need purpose and passion on top of that, and even better, you need perseverance for that. So talent is associated with fixed mindset, whereas purpose, passion, and perseverance are associated with growth mindset. So it's an important concept to keep in mind. Japanese have a concept called the ikigai concept. Some of you may have learned about this. So sometimes students come to ask me, what should I do with my life? I point them to the ikigai concept. And that is, find out what you love. Also find out what you're good at. Also find out whether the world needs it. You're doing something for the world. And then finally ask, do you get paid for it? So the point at the intersection of these four Venn diagrams is where you should be. Okay. So what you love, what you're good at, what the world needs, and what you get paid for. So karma theory is very central to this. You have to have the passion, you have to be good at it, you have to do it something that the world needs, which is another concept within karmic theory called Loka Sangraham, which Bhagavad Gita talks about it. Whatever you do, make sure that the society benefits from it. So this is where it comes about doing the right thing and also doing it well. Doing the right thing is Loka Sangraham. Doing it well is Kaushalam. Yoga Karmasu Kaushalam. So that is doing it well. Doing it right and doing it well. So I won't go into the gunas too much because I'm not an expert. You have Dr. Bhargav here who knows this well. But very simply, I want to say that each person has his or her own strengths. Some have the strengths of being a warrior. Some have the strengths of becoming a scholar. Some are simply good workers. So one has to choose the path one takes based on one's own strengths. That is what gunas is about. And Dr. Bhargav is writing more papers about this. He has already published some important papers about this. The third path, we talked about jnana and karma. The third path is the path of emotion. And that is being in awe of being greater than oneself. There is an emotional path, but not all emotions lead you to that path. The emotions that lead one to the path of the higher self-realization is the path of that emotion that you have when you are awestruck by something higher than yourself. When you are in the middle of nature, and you are looking up the sky with the trillions of stars there, and you realize how small you are. That's good enough. You don't have to have God for this. So that's the emotion of awe. And Krishna knew this. And he said to Arjuna, if karma doesn't work for you, if jnana doesn't work for you, it's okay. Just be awestruck by me. And so he reveals himself with all his thousands of faces and thousands of arms and legs. Awe can be both frightening and awesome. And Krishna shows Arjuna that. Arjuna is trembling with fear to begin with, but then, of course, he is overjoyed once he overcomes his fear. Now, again, I'm a little bit of an agnostic. Bhakti doesn't easily come to me. So I search for ways of thinking about how it might work. And to my, mind with my medical training, what appeals to me really is the power of the fact that most of the times the treatments that we give, the medicines that we give, we know this now scientifically, that 90% of their work is not because of the pharmacological effect, but because it works on your body through your faith in the doctor, right? That's called the placebo effect. So bhakti is the placebo effect in some ways. Bhakti is powerful because of the placebo effect. So I would recommend that, we all move in that path because it's so powerful. So Hemant is going to teach me about that sometime going forward. So yeah, that's bhakti. But this kind of a feeling of being a drop in an ocean, being an wave in an ocean, doesn't necessarily have to come from going to a bhajan or being in a temple. There is nowadays the belief that one can also get that through manipulating the brain chemistry. So there are these compounds like psilocybin. I'm not recommending them, but I'm saying that this is another way to think about it. Psilocybin leads to a cosmic experience, a feeling like you are one with the rest of society. that dissolution of the ego. And single doses of psilocybin have been shown to dissolve that boundary between the self and the other, at least for transient periods of time. Not for everybody, but under a appropriate therapeutic setting, with the therapist sitting next to you and guiding you through the experience, it may be possible to get a mystical cosmic experience. And that has been used psychotherapeutically, and there are studies that have shown that single doses of psilocybin can lead to relief from depression for a few months at a time. Again, very early, and I'm not recommending. The FDA has not approved it yet, but this is a potential option. Has been used in people with terminal cancer, especially. This is a pharmacological approach to Bhakti yoga, in my view. Okay, so think about that. The next path is the Jnana yoga, so being mindful. And this cartoon shows you about one kind of it, which is the Dhyana yoga. And I'm going to take you through this next one slide, which will give you a 1 minute description or explanation of meditations, which are a very powerful technique. And here is the way to think about it. We all have our minds, we think of our minds as our thoughts, feelings, and sensations that are coming into our current, mental slate, if you will. So that's the present. But our mind doesn't just focus on one thing. It's been reported that in any given day, we have about 70,000 thoughts in our mind, right? Most of those, about 47% of them, are thoughts about something else, not the current thing you're thinking about, but something else, somewhere else, somebody else, past, future, so on. This is the called mind wandering, right? So all these thoughts and emotions, they come and go. Throughout our life, this is what's happening, right? So there is one kind of meditation which is called dharana in Patanjali Yoga Sutra. That is to focus on one thing at a time, one emotion at a time, one sensation at a time, or one thought at a time, and hold your mind onto that. That's called dharana. In Sanskrit, dharana means holding something. Hold on to this. It could be, easiest thing would be your own breath. Observe the breath, focus on the breath. So that is the dharana part of it. Or it could be a rosary beads, or it could be a mantra, it could be a lamp, it could be a candle, a dharana. But there is another kind, which is just don't focus on anything. Just observe whatever comes to your mind. Observe the thoughts and feelings and sensations come and go like clouds in the sky. So the first one is dharana, and dharana is, one thing that Arjuna keeps telling Krishna. My mind is so fickle, I can't hold it steady. So Krishna says, practice, my friend. The more you practice, the more you can control it. Okay. Abhyasena to kaunteya. That is, the practice itself is very important. The second type of meditation is to not focus on anything, just observe whatever comes into your mind, but observe in a detached way. Don't make judgments, right? So that there comes the second part of that stanza. Abhyasa is the first. Vairagya, that is, detach. Observe the thoughts and feelings and emotions, and don't attach emotions to them. And that is the second kind, which is called insight meditation. Not the focus meditation, but insight meditation. The Buddhists call it the Vipassana kind of meditation. In the Patanjali Yoga Sutra, it is Jnana, Dhyana. So there is, in this, the important thing is you are the observer and you're observing your mind, right? So it's the observer self and the observed self. There is the subject and the object. There is a third kind of meditation where you transcend even that distinction between the observed and the observer and experience the oneness of the observer and the observed. Could be through a mantra. Go into the deepest layer of the ocean instead of focusing on one wave or focusing on all the waves, but just don't even focus on the waves, but get to the bottom of the ocean. That is called samadhi, where you're really experiencing that oneness. And this is what TM is about, transcendental meditation. So they typically use a mantra for that. So those are the three types of meditation that are described in modern literature. So the joke goes, I have never met anyone so thoughtless in my life. Keep up the good work. Thank you, Master. So thoughtlessness is not a bad thing. Mindlessness is not a bad thing. Okay? But a mindlessness with observing the mindlessness itself is the key point. Being able to observe the lack of thoughts would be the goal for that. Now, what does brain physiology tell us about all this? The last 20 years, it has been understood that there are two circuitries in the brain. There is the circuitry that involves focusing on something or the other and completing a task, whether it is reading something, whether it is solving a mathematical problem, or whether it is singing a tune or painting a sketch. You're using some part, you're completing a task. And a very simplistic way, the lateral side of the brain, many regions, such as the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex and the inferior parietal cortex and the superior temporal gyri together, a lot of them engage in one or other task-related activity. It's called the task circuitry. You can focus on any one of them, which is the single focus meditation, dharana, that I've been talking about. Focus on the task mode. Normally, when the task mode is activated, what happens to the other circuitry? There is another circuitry. When you're doing something, your mind is not wandering, right? So the mind wandering circuit is turned off. So the goal of the task circuitry is to turn off the mind wandering circuitry. The mind wandering circuitry is inside the brain. Okay? So in the inner side, the medial prefrontal cortex, the precuneus, okay? And this anterior cingulate, and so on. That's called the default mode circuitry. So default means when you're not doing anything, your brain goes into a default. It's a resting default state. So what meditation does, not all meditation do the same thing. You're engaging the task circuitry in dharana. You're engaging the default circuitry in dhyana, where you're not focusing on anything. You're letting the mind wander, but observe the mind. As you observe the mind anyway, the default circuitry stops rippling, stops going haywire. So the goal of dhyana also is to quieten the default circuitry. If it is unquiet, it leads to a lot of mental anguish. In psychosis, we have seen this in our own work and in literature in people with schizophrenia. The default mode circuitry is overactive. So the way to address that would be to teach them to calm down the default mode circuitry by learning how to do this kind of dhyana meditation. But also you can do the same thing by engaging the task circuitry, which inhibits the default circuitry. So, yeah. So here is, I just wanted to point out again, coming back to a point that I made earlier, that yoga is not one thing. Yoga is not just standing on it on your head. It is not more than asanas. It is a whole package of lifestyle management. So there are do's and don'ts, which are the yamas and niyamas and the asanas. And then there is breath control, which regulates the autonomic nervous system. And then there is the dharana, which is one point concentration. And then there is the dhyana, which is the open source meditation. And then there is the um, samadhi, which is the experience of non-dualistic awareness. All of them work on different layers of our overall personhood. We, as I said earlier, we're not one thing. We are multiple selves here. We have the Annamaya Kosha, which is the body. We have the energy body. We have the physical body. We have the energy or the autonomic body. And then we have the mental body. And then we have the intellectual body. And then we have the bliss or the happiness. The different steps of the 8-step yoga by Patanjali take you through the 5 layers of the physical, um, emotional, intellectual, and spiritual aspects of oneself. So it's a whole body, whole mind training, which is unlike many of the Western approaches to psychotherapy, which take one thing at a time. But what yoga does is a comprehensive, integrated approach to multiple aspects of the human being. So the other thing that the Vedantic and the Vedic and Upanishads and Buddhistic concepts take you through is to make a distinction between 2 kinds of happiness. There is the happiness that is transient, which is related to getting what you want, reward oriented happiness. It's like running a treadmill. You're constantly in the same place, but you're running. So, each time that you get something, you want more, right? So that is called hedonistic happiness. And then there is the other kind of happiness, which is more non contingent on external rewards, which is in positive psychology circles, it's called eudaimonic happiness, which can be internally generated. It is trainable. Yeah. So, what is it that helps one to train one's own internally generated contentment or happiness? And that is where yoga gets into this. So, it's, the transient happiness, which is much more fluctuating, versus the persistent happiness, which is more, um, you know, it is more continuous. And there is a set point. Everyone has a certain set point of happiness. Some people are basically always morose and unhappy, and there are some who are inherently happy, and part of it may be genetically determined. It is said that about 50% of one's happiness is genetically determined, but the other 50%, 40% may be trainable, and about 10% is related to external events. Okay, that's what happiness psychologists talk about. And that happiness set point can be elevated with yoga, is the point. From a neurochemical point of view, how does happiness work? Transient happiness may be related to dopamine. So the brain is wired in such a way that you want to do more of something that gives you happiness. So the neurochemical that is related to reward, called dopamine, is related to that kind of transient happiness. Each time that you get a little bit of positive feedback, there is a little blurch of dopamine from in your brain, in the mesolimbic dopaminergic system. Every time you look at your Facebook and see somebody has liked your, post, there's a little dopamine spurt that goes into your brain, right? And dopamine is very addictive. It's like amphetamines, like speed, right? So dopamine is the addiction chemical. But there are other hormones in the body that are much more related to sustained happiness. Oxytocin is one of them. Serotonin is the other, right? So I won't go into all those details at this point. Krishna also takes Arjuna through another very important aspect. How am I doing with time?
Yes, sir. No problem. You can go.
Oh, sorry.
On the side.
Yeah. He says letting go is very important. In fact, in one stanza, he even says letting go is the best approach. So if something doesn't work, just stop even pushing it. Sometimes letting go itself may be the solution, as this cartoon points out. But of course, you can't let go all the time. This cartoon here, you can't exactly let go. So in summary, there are many psychotherapeutic elements in Hindu Buddhist teachings. We talked about cognitive behavior therapy, which involves correcting abnormal cognitive schemes. There is acceptance and commitment therapy, which helps the individual to accept what cannot be changed, but take commitment to act on what you can change, which is this classic serenity prayer. And then there is this other approach in psychotherapy called dialectical behavior therapy, which really takes a mindful approach to observe and not make judgments. So the Marsha Linehan, who herself had a borderline personality disorder, she went to a Buddhist monastery and learned principles of dialectical behavior therapy. And Adrian Wells and Jonathan Kabat-Zinn, they developed metacognitive therapy and mindfulness-based stress reduction based on non-judgmental self-reflection. And finally, Martin Seligman, who's the father of positive psychology, he has, and many others, have brought in the concepts of yogic concepts of intrinsic motivation, gratitude, compassion into the current psychotherapeutic armamentarium. So, which is really, in many ways, an offshoot of yogic thinking. So there is a lot of potential in combining some of these modern principles to ancient thoughts. Acceptance, awareness, action, the emotion of awe, being present, choosing happiness, and detachment, letting go, are the key principles. So I think those are the different modern psychotherapeutic techniques that. So the main point here is that Western modern psychotherapeutic approaches are actually coming in many ways to embrace concepts that were developed in the East. So there is more work to be done to integrate modern psychotherapy with Western insights. So my theory of everything now. So I talked about 4 legs for yoga, but I'm beginning to think that there may be only three legs: jnana, bhakti, and karma. But dhyana is a tool that works for all of those approaches. So if you are a jnani or a karmic person or a bhakti person, they all lead to one or other form of meditation techniques and approaches. Karma will lead to dharana. Jnana will lead to the dhyana yoga. And bhakti leads to awe and those emotions. All of them in a meditative concept lead you to understand oneself better. And so the theory of everything is that ultimately a lot of psychopathology is related to us not knowing who we are And yoga is the way to better understand who we are. And it can come to us from multiple paths. So I think that's the summary. And it's a long journey. There is no shortcut, as this cartoon says. And I want to take home points. Yoga offers an integrated approach using a multi-pronged approach to mitigate suffering. A common denominator may be the self. If you think about it, what is karma? It is selfless action. What is jnana? It is understanding the higher self. And what is bhakti? It is the surrendering to the self. So ultimately, they all come down to the self. So that's the theory of everything. This can be potentially integrated into modern psychotherapy, psychiatry to create an integrated secular model for both the treatment and prevention. So many people that I want to thank. Some of them maybe are here, and some are maybe on the call. But thank you.
Thank you, sir. Bhagavad Gita was spoken by Krishna 3000 years ago. Today we got a newer insight into Bhagavad Gita by Keshavan. Keshavan. So we are really, really grateful to you, sir. Now, these unearthing the Indian philosophy and showing that the concept in Hinduism were very much there, and probably a lot of things in Western psychology are borrowed from these concepts. Such an enlightening presentation, sir. We are really, really grateful to you for sparing your valuable time and providing us with this knowledge. There are many budding students here who really want to take this area, do PhD into these areas. So I really hope that the guidance, the light that you have shown will be able to guide them.
Thank you.
So once again, I express my heartfelt gratitude to Keshavan sir for coming. We have 5 more minutes. Any student or anybody would like to ask or comment or share anything?
Hello, can I?
Yes, madam. Yes.
My name is Sushma. Sorry. So actually, I'm from UK. This talk actually is forwarded by my yoga instructor, Dr. Yashaswini.
Yes.
We share some common interests actually. So
Yes.
this is like around 11 o'clock here in the morning, and it was a really great presentation. I'm a budding student of psychology as well, and recently I've been thinking that Krishna was a very great therapist. So that was what I got from the talk as well. So it is quite informative. Thank you so much. Thanks, Yashaswini, for pointing me out as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
Hi. Could I take a moment to acknowledge the presentation?
Yes.
So thank you so much for extending the invite, Dr. Bhargav. This was hearing the doctor here through Yantra, through so many times going over his new additions on the slides for Bhagavad Gita is always very insightful. It's like continued learning for ourselves, which only goes on to say that how the speaker himself over the years that I've been repeating the Bhagavad Gita, learning from him, he's evolving and he's continuing to pass us the updates on the slides. It's very refreshing to go through them. Currently, I'm at Ramana Ashram for the last 2.5 months. And it's a 3-month stay. And the theory of everything was so beautifully a reflection that I had been having through Jnana Yoga here. That when I do Raja Yoga or Bhakti Yoga or Karam Yoga or Jnana or Kriya Yoga, all of it does bring me to the state of Dhyana. So I kind of really, it feels like the cosmic awareness channelizes through multiple individuals, like there is a collective consciousness. So because I was actually reflecting on all of this in Ramana's cave called Virupaksha, where he meditated for 17 years. And that's where I am right now attending this. So it was like the reflection in a certain direction got validated through this workshop. So thank you so much.
Sajal, for your wonderful feedback. Actually, we are short of time. So I thank sir once again. I also welcome Shivram sir, who has just joined us. Sir, we have recorded the session, so
No, I
you know,
was
I'll
there in
be.
the session. Yeah.
Oh, you were there online. Okay. So now I would like to request, Shivram sir to kindly felicitate
Oh.
sir with a small token of our love
Like it
and
seems. Just walk from my office to here.
Kishore sir, please for a photo. Umesh ji, please come. We'll
Do you
take.
have this book, sir?
No, I don't.
Oh, then it's
Oh,
good.
thank you so much.
This is something that we published during the COVID.
Hmm.
We tried to put all the sort of modules and the research that we have
Oh,
done into a
wonderful.
book.
Yeah,
Thank you for coming, sir.
thank you so much. Yeah.
We were actually in a conference on Zoom and with BNG in the morning
Oh, I see. Okay.
regarding a course that we are doing. So I'm very happy, sir.
Oh,
Thank you.
oh, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much for coming.
Sir, please, we'll have a photo.
Please come. So it's available on Amazon, sir.
Okay.
This one. So it's a little outdated maybe in terms of the last 2 years, but otherwise it compiles almost everything that we have done.
Is it done in the yoga, I mean, the COVID context?
No. I started it during that time.
Ah.
So
Thank you.
We have arranged a coffee for everybody.
So did I take my
Yes, sir.
flash drive back? Oh, yeah, okay.
Please, we can all take a 5-minute break and we will join again in 5 minutes. Please take a 5-minute break.